Crash, crash, crash.
Crash! Crash!
Get crashed!
I love the original 3 Crash Bandicoot games, but if there's anything in the Sane Trilogy that is a little lackluster, it has to be the bosses. Whereas the majority of the levels in the trilogy are good, many of the bosses are just okay, or in some cases worse than that. But there definitely are some gems in there. The Sane Trilogy features 6 bosses from Crash 1, 5 bosses from Crash 2 and 5 bosses from Crash 3, bringing us a grand total of 16 bosses. Let's just go ahead and dive right in with the worst boss of all.
Quickly! Into the vortex!
So you're coming right to the end of Crash Bandicoot 2. You've just completed some of the hardest challenges in the game. You're ready for whatever final boss the game throws at you. I say that, but maybe you weren't prepared for having to face the easiest boss in the whole game, Dr. Neo Cortex from Crash Bandicoot 2. You just fly into him 3 times with a jetpack, spin at him, and Brio's your uncle, you've beaten Crash 2. The rocks don't even kill you, they just kinda push you back a bit. What an anticlimax. I love everything about Pinstripe Potaru, except the actual boss fight itself. You just hide behind these 2 chairs for a bit and pop out every now and again to attack him. Yay, I won. I can't really rag on Papu too much, seeing as he is the first boss of the entire collection, but that doesn't stop the boss fight from still being pretty boring. Just jump on him a few times and, well, that's about it. Oh, and don't mind this bad footage. I don't suck. I was just trying something, okay? The Tiny Tiger fight from Crash 3 ain't terrible. For a first boss fight, there's more going on in this one than Papu anyway. But it's not really a fight that's fun on repeated playthroughs. The lines are easy to avoid and then you're just running around in circles during the tiny phases. Ripperoo from Crash 1 does take a bit of brain power to defeat. You have to time your jumps on the TNT crates perfectly so that the explosions line up with Ripperoo's jumping pattern. As the fight progresses, it becomes a bit harder and more frustrating. Overall though, it's not too bad of a fight. The Dr. Engine fight from Crash 2 looks really cool when you first start it, and the idea behind it is a good one. The whole fight is spent avoiding his attacks while sneaking in a few hits with your Wumpa Fruit. It really is sneaking them in though. If you're just spamming the attack button, your accuracy will be like 10 to 20%. This is because your opportunity for damage on the boss is very thin, and it makes the fight kind of tedious. If they packed him with more health and made him more vulnerable to attacks, this fight could have been way higher on the list. While Ripperoo from Crash 2 isn't the hardest boss ever, you might not be beating him on your first try. It can seem a bit overwhelming at first when he lays down a flurry of TNT and nitros, but there's always a safe spot on the board. It's a decent boss fight. Koala Kong is the first boss on the list that I would consider to be pretty good. This fight has quite a bit of substance. Not only do you have to perfectly dodge his boulder attacks and the TNT crates, but when you counter attack you have to time it well so that you don't accidentally hit the minecart. It's a good amount of challenge and a pretty fun time. I wanted to put the Komodo brothers fight higher, but I feel that the boss fight is lacking some more interesting mechanics or phases. With that being said, it's still a lot of fun to dodge those sword attacks and smack the brothers into one another. It's a shame that these dragons never made it back into another platforming Crash game. The Dr. Nitrous Brio fight shows that there was a time when Brio would go any lengths to help Cortex achieve his plans. Although the enemies in the fight aren't the most interesting, their patterns can make it quite the challenge considering how small the arena is. Brio's final phase leaves me wanting, but it doesn't detract too much from what is overall a good boss fight. Tiny Tiger's boss fight in Crash 2 is way more fun than the one in Crash 3. It's the same process every phase, trick Tiny into jumping down a gap, but it gets much harder as the fight progresses. It forces you to make good use of the slide jump and think on your toes as Tiny changes direction. It stands out from the rest of the bosses in Crash 2 as being genuinely really good. The Cortex fight from Crash 1 is the type of final boss fight that Crash 2 desperately needed. The differing colour of the orb shots make it clear to the player how they have to avoid them, but throwing them all at you at once is a fun and fair challenge that becomes increasingly enjoyable as the fight goes on. It's a fairly difficult fight, as a final battle should be, but it's not overly frustrating. Great balance, great boss fight. The visuals and the sound from the Tropy boss fight are excellent. His waves of electricity that he shoots at you look very menacing. His is the only boss fight that revolves around increasingly difficult platforming challenges, besides Tiny from Crash 2 I suppose. I'm not saying it's an easy boss fight, but I just wish it was a little harder. The Cortex fight from Crash 3 is another boss fight that is a visual spectacle. Seeing Aku Aku and Uka Uka duke it out is an awesome sight, which also serves as an obstacle that changes with each phase. Throughout Crash 3, Cortex acts as if he's given up, which is also reflected in his boss fight. He just sort of aimlessly flies around, seemingly waiting for you to attack him. The whole fight is a great conclusion to Crash 3 and very memorable. On top of being one of the best designed Crash villains, Dingodile also has an excellent boss fight. It's not hard, but it's a hell of a lot of fun. After avoiding his raining shots of death, you have to bait him into shooting at you, destroying his own barrier, kind of like Space Invaders. This gives you the opportunity to run in and cause some pain. Of course, pros like me will just skip the shooting phase altogether by just slide jumping in there. Again, the visuals in this fight are excellent, especially the colour scheme of Dingo's barrier. It's an awesome boss fight that is almost number one, if it wasn't for this next one.
So, Crash Bandicoot, we meet again.
Yep, Crash 3 definitely had the best boss fights in the Sane Trilogy, and the best of the best is Dr. N. Jin. This boss fight creates its own unique style of play, with Coco flying around in a spaceship in a 3D shooter. It's not just for show though, the way it plays is damn fun. You have to chip away at N. Jin like you did in Crash 2, but he is much more open to your attacks while still feeling pretty tanky, elongating the fight but not making it overstay its welcome. It's all about risking getting hit by his attacks so that you can deal some damage yourself. It works tremendously well, and it's not quite finished after you take down all of his health. After witnessing one of the most beautiful animations in the remake, in which Pura joins the fight, you're treated to a whole different, harder phase. This boss fight may have been slightly nerfed in the Insane Trilogy, but that doesn't stop it from being the best fight in the collection and a legitimately excellent boss fight, not just for Crash Bandicoot but for video games in general. As always, I'd like to thank you for watching and have fun playing video games.
Crash Bandicoot should have been a genius, but he doesn't quite compute. Crash Bandicoot.